Welcome back to Simple Truth, where we try to make some simple truths out of the truth. I think that's not exactly how it works. I think I actually make things more complex than the truth, but I like to think of it that way. We're in the story of David. We're in 1 Samuel. We're in 23. We're almost to the end of chapter 23, right? And we're just going through verse by verse and pointing out some simple truths about the story of David. Right, so we've kind of left this whole concept of David saved a city, and the city kind of turned on him and was going to turn him over to Saul, his enemy, and we're watching this whole thing kind of play out. So we're in verse 24, and it says this: They rose, they went to Ziph ahead of Saul. Now David and his men were in the wilderness of Maon, in the Arabith to the south of Jeshimon. And Saul and his men went to seek him. David was told, so he went down to the rock and lived in the wilderness of Maon. And when Saul heard that he pursued after David in the wilderness of Maon, Saul went on one side of the mountain, David and his men on the other side of the mountain. And David was hurrying to get away from Saul. As Saul and his men were closing in on David and his men to capture them, a messenger came to Saul saying, "Hurry, come forth, for the Philistines have made a raid against the land." So Saul returned from pursuing after David, went again to the Philistines. Therefore, the place was called the Rock of Escape. And David went up from there and lived in the strongholds of En-Gedi. Right? So we look at the story, and it's such a practical story. And the reason I've been able to go through 7 verses at a time is you want the whole context of the story. David is running away from Saul, right? He's running away from Saul, even though David has been declared and anointed by God as the next king, right? So David seemingly is running away from his very anointing. He's running away from that which was promised. I don't know about you, but I certainly am and have in the past lived in these moments where God has promised something to you, but you're seemingly running away from that promise. Like, why am I getting further away from that whole thing, right? Again, God is prepping David for what he has for him. Very similar nature to the story of Joseph, right? None of us would have chosen to be a servant, a slave, a prisoner, and then get to be second in command, right? It tells us and shows us God's not a respecter of persons. He doesn't care where you've been. He doesn't care what you've been through. He doesn't care if somebody's labeled you a criminal, a person, right? Again, we want to say that criminals are disqualified, right? Prisoners are disqualified. Where you've been disqualifies you. God sometimes says, listen, I allowed you to go through that so that you could be qualified to do what I've called you to do, right? We don't think that way. We never stop and say, wow, is God allowing this person to go through this or me to go through this? Because he's actually getting us ready for what he has for us. And David is about ready to be king. And part of being king isn't just taking care of the people that you like, it's taking care of the people that you don't like. How do you deal with criminals and prisoners and the misfits of life? What do you do with all of these people, right? You can't kill them all, and you can't just build prisons for them all, right? So what happens to this whole thing? David's being prepared. And in this whole story, we see that David is running away from Saul. Saul, hot pursuit, right? And again, God does not interfere with David running away and Saul pursuing. It's a little bit like Moses, right, running away with the Israelites and the Egyptians closing in on them before the Red Sea. At just the right moment, God is going to intervene, and he's going to do something that only he could do. But he may let it get very bleak. You may be standing on the shore of the Red Sea, or you may be on the same mountain as your enemy, just trying to outrun them, right? And all of a sudden, it looks bleak, but God opens up the Red Sea. God calls away the enemy, gets the attention of the enemy somewhere else. This is what happens. God intervenes. Not by defeating Saul and the army himself with another army coming, or David having a great victory. Not by David getting to run away and escaping. But God intervenes by calling Saul's attention away. That's problematic because that does not mean that Saul forgot about David. He got called away for a moment. And a lot of times God intervenes by giving us a respite for a moment, for a second, letting us have a break from something. But that doesn't mean that the person's attention, right, is completely taken away from us. Doesn't mean that the person doesn't notice us still. Doesn't mean that the people are that they're still out to get us. We just get a break in a moment. That's my prayer for you, for me, in our battle with the enemy. Right? Every once in a while, we just need a break from the enemy. The enemy's attention is taken somewhere else. He gets called to something else, and we just get to breathe for a second. Some of us, right, have been fighting battles so hard, so long, and we just need a break. Right? That's the simple truth in this story. Are you there? Do you need a break? Right? Do you need a moment and say, God, can I just have a moment and catch my breath? Right? God doesn't promise He's going to make it all go away, all be better, make your enemy forget about you. But He does promise that at times He will intervene. That if we follow Him and we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, our enemy is not going to overtake us. The truth of this matter is, at no point in these years was David overtaken by Saul. God actually delivers Saul into David's hands on a couple occasions. Right? There's nothing that says that God wouldn't have done that in this occasion. Right? But how God chose to work was different in nature than maybe the last time or the other time. At any time, God could take Saul out of the picture and end this for David and promote him to where he's supposed to be. So all of this plays into this picture. Lots of things for you to chew on right there. Pray that you would do that. If you need a respite, call out to God. Ask Him, say, Lord, I just need a break for 1 minute. I need a break from my enemy. Could you just call His attention somewhere else, right, for a second? We'll see you right here next time on Simple Truth.